Mohammed, are we ready to start? I see we have a good number of participants.
Yes, we have, and then it's 6:01. So, good afternoon, all. I think we should get started. Thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. And this is the second budget town hall. We had the first one in person, and this one is online in order also to accommodate community members, especially part-time students, to be able to join us. So that's why we're starting at 6 p.m. As you know, these consultations are an important part of the budget planning process. They give us the opportunity to hear directly from our community and help ensure that budget decisions reflect our shared priorities, our values, and the realities we are facing as an institution. Just a reminder that each year our Board of Governors requires the university to develop a responsible and transparent annual budget that support long-term financial sustainability. One of the requirements from the board is to present every year a balanced budget, and we have been doing that for a number of years. That means planning carefully, not just for the coming year, but with future students, faculty, and staff in mind. As you know, we operate in an environment that is highly regulated by the government, and we are still managing the lasting effects of the tuition reduction and the multi-year freeze introduced several years ago. At the same time, there have been some important positive developments this year. The provincial government announced a modest tuition increase and changes to operating funds that will provide additional support to universities, colleges, and indigenous institutes. These steps are tremendously helpful, but they will not fully offset rising costs or the cumulative impact of past funding constraints. We are also continuing to work with federal limits on international study permits, which create uncertainty for enrollment planning, even as interest in TMU remains very strongly globally this year. In response, we are focusing on careful management of our resources, improving efficiency, and implementing recommendations from our recent third-party efficiency review, which my colleagues will be elaborating on later. This is all done while we continue to invest in our core mission of teaching, learning, and SRC. Despite the measures, we have much to be proud of as a community. We are advancing our academic priorities, strengthening the student experience, and moving forward with major priorities. Our new School of Medicine in Brampton is now open, and the first cohort of students is already in their second term. The good news, construction of our new Student Wellbeing Center is underway at the heart of our Toronto campus. We are also making significant progress on student housing affordability. With the province support, we are moving forward on a new residence tower at 100 Bond Street that will more than double our on-campus housing capacity, providing much needed affordable options for students. And we will continue to be recognized for academic excellence on a global scale. These achievements underscore that TMU continues to be a strong community builder and, most importantly, university committed to its mission to prepare the next generation of leaders working to drive positive change. With that, I will turn it to our provost, Roberta will speak about the guiding principles for this year's budget. And I look forward to your questions and comments at the end of both Roberta and Kimberly presentation. Over to you, Roberta.
Thank you very much, President Lashmi. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to participate in today's town hall. For this session, we'll be using Mentimeter. So if you log into www.menti.com, on a future slide, you'll see the code to enter. So thank you again for taking the time to participate in today's budget town hall. Your feedback and input are crucial steps in our budget planning. The operating budget is the university's financial plan for how we will receive and allocate funds in a fiscal year. It outlines our projected revenues and expenditures and reflects how we prioritize and distribute resources to advance the goals and objectives of the university. It's also a key mechanism for accountability with our stakeholders, ensuring that our financial decisions align with our institutional commitments. Next slide, please. As we prepare the annual budget, we are guided by 5 core principles. The first, as always, is to prioritize our students. The second is to protect TMU's core business of teaching and SRC. The third is to be fair and transparent. We also need to remain forward-looking. And as part of this process, we conduct wide consultations with the community, as we are doing today. These principles shape our decision-making and anchor our approach as we plan responsibly for the future. Next slide, please. Over the past 2 years, we have engaged the community in producing strategic plans that cover 3 areas: the academic plan, the strategic research plan, and our international plan. These are complemented by the campus master plan and anchored by the university's strategic vision, which takes us to 2030. The strategic vision brings these plans together within a shared framework. Collectively, these plans represent our community's vision for the future, and we will use them as the foundation and roadmap for moving the university forward. As we build the 2026-2027 budget, we remain grounded in the priorities articulated in Transforming Futures, the 2025-2030 academic plan, which are to enhance the learning journey for greater student success, to create positive impact through SRC excellence and local and global collaboration, to support our people in our community, and to continue our commitment to truth and reconciliation, along with ensuring future readiness. Next slide, please. As we look ahead to 2026-2027, our priorities are to align with TMU's strategic vision and related plans, to provide a high-quality experience for undergraduate and graduate students, both inside and outside the classroom, to continue the implementation of the university's academic plan, and to plan prudently to ensure responsible stewardship of our resources. As I mentioned, for this session, we'll be using Mentimeter to collect your responses in real time. Of course, all responses are completely anonymous. To interact with this slide, please enter the code after you've gone into, I see some people are already entering after you've gone to the website. So of course, this is a word cloud, and it will change and grow as responses are received. And if multiple people put in the same word, then that word will get bigger on the screen. So we'll spend a couple of seconds gathering your responses. So it's really no surprise that student well-being and student experience continue to be top priorities for our community. Students really anchor us at the university. I see better career pathways, which is part of our pillar in the academic plan for future readiness, which really does differentiate TMU. Well-being in general, of course, for faculty and staff is important. Responsible AI. Library. Okay, transparency, faculty well-being, job security, and a whole host of other things that I can't see well, but that we will collect as part of the budget planning process. And these will be used to inform our planning. So thank you very much for interacting with this slide. I'll now turn it over to Kimberly McCausland, our Vice Provost University Planning, who will walk us through the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Roberta, and good evening, everyone. I'll start by providing an overview of some of the major factors that affect our budget and all university budgets. Then I'll move to the recent announcement by the province, and after that, I'll talk about some specific details related to TMU's own planning for the year ahead. So this slide provides an overview of where we get our operating revenues from and what we spend them on. If you have attended a TMU budget session in the past or received information on our budget, this will look familiar because the major components that underlie university budgets remain pretty similar from one year to the next. Most of our revenue, close to 90% of it, is tied directly to student enrollment. More than half comes from tuition fees, which are largely regulated by the government's tuition fee framework or policy. 35% of our revenue comes from government grants that are tied primarily to enrollment. On the expenditure side, most of our spending is on salaries and benefits, which is not surprising given our core business, which is completely about people, people who are teaching, doing research, providing student services, maintaining our infrastructure, and so much more. 16% of our spending is on non-salary costs, things like equipment and supplies, computing hardware, library materials, all of the things we need to buy to make an institution run. 4.5% of our spending is on student financial aid. Next slide, please. I had just mentioned grants as a source of revenue. Government grants are limited to domestic students, and the number of domestic students for whom we receive grant funding is limited by the Ministry of Colleges, Universities, Research Excellence, and Security. Our domestic enrollment current levels are slightly above those funded levels. I'll say a little more on that in a moment. The main point here, though, is that overall our domestic enrollment levels are healthy. We have sufficient student applications to exceed grant-funded enrollment levels, and we're on track to keep our domestic enrollment roughly at the same level going into the next year. Next slide, please. On international enrollment, as of late January, total applications to TMU from international students were up by more than 20% compared to the same point last year. In comparison, the average increase for the rest of the province over last year's level was about 7%. Despite that significant increase that we've seen this year, we may not be able to admit many more new international students this coming fall because the federal government is continuing to restrict the number of international student study permits they are granting even further than they did last year. Across the province, including at TMU, the number of permit applications that has been allocated to institutions by the provincial government has been reduced from last year's initial allocation by 1/3. So if you're not familiar with the study permit process, the way it works is that the federal government sets a limit on the number of new international students who they will permit to enter the country each year. Then they allocate a certain number of spaces to each province. The province that is then responsible to allocate that number across their institutions, across their colleges and universities. So all institutions in the province saw a drop of 33% in that number this year. Apart from new year one intake into into undergraduate programs, I should say, apart from new intake, our overall number of international students at TMU is projected to decrease in 2026-27 because our largest intake of students occurred in around 2021 to 2022. Most of those students will have finished their studies here by next year. A number of them are still with us now, but by next year, many of them will have moved on. Next slide, please. This chart provides some information about how TMU compares to other universities in the province with respect to the proportion of its enrollment that is made up of international students. And you can see TMU as the yellow bar not too far from the left. In 2024-25, which is the most recent year where we have system-wide available data, TMU's international student share of total enrollment, here defined as students who are not Canadian citizens or permanent residents, was about 11%, and for the Ontario University system as a whole, it was just under 20. So while international enrollment is an important component of our student body for a number of reasons, we are not as exposed as some other institutions to changes in policy or other factors that affect the level of enrollment. Next slide. A few years ago, the provincial government formed a blue ribbon panel on financial sustainability in post-secondary education. This was a government-appointed panel of experts who studied the state of the post-secondary sector and made some recommendations about institutions' financial situations. In their report, the panel recommended increases to tuition beginning in 2024-25 and continuing thereafter. Their recommendation was to start with a one-time increase of 5%, followed by annual increases that were 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is higher. The province is now implementing a fee framework that will allow tuition increases beginning in 2026-27, and they're starting with 2% for each of 3 years, and after that it will be 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. When thinking about a potential increase, it's really important to consider it in the context of the fee reduction and freeze that happened several years ago. So let's go to the next slide to look at that. In 2019, the province required colleges and universities to reduce fees by 10% compared to 2018 levels. That brought fees back to roughly where they were in 2015 or 16, and we've had to keep them frozen at that level ever since. So while the cost of things around us goes up, including the things, of course, that we need to pay for as a university, we've had to hold fees at that reduced level. If we had not been required to cut our fees, and they had increased each year with regular increases annually, our current operating budget would have more than $80 million in it. than it does today. So it'd be 80 million higher than it is today. A 2% fee increase in 1 year would help to close that gap a little. It would be roughly $5 million or about 6% of the existing gap. So it's very important to consider any potential increase in that context. Next slide, please. In mid-February, we heard a positive announcement about new funding from the province for colleges, universities, and Indigenous institutes. The province announced $6.4 billion over 4 years. That's a cumulative number. It's not an annual funding number. So it's 4 years across all of the institutions in the province. And the announcement indicated that the funding would be used to support a number of things. First, it will include an increase in the number of funded enrollment spaces. I had mentioned the number of spaces for which we receive funding is limited by the province. Some of those spaces or enrollment growth has already occurred but is not yet funded, and they will also be funding some future growth. The province will also increase the level of per student funding, so the grant level per student that they will provide. And they will offer some augmented supports or increased supports for a number of special situations, such as supports for northern and smaller institutions, French language supports. We're still waiting for details about TMU's allocation, and this will depend on a number of things, such as the split between colleges and universities, how much of this repurposes existing funds that may have already been announced for some special projects versus incremental new dollars. So we don't know all of the specific details about our own allocation yet, but it is very positive news for our institution and for the sector as a whole. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for TMU specifically? Let's go ahead to the next slide, and we'll just do a quick recap. Here's our context. The first 3 items on this list will, of course, help with our financial picture. We know that we can plan for a modest tuition increase in our budget scenarios. We are expecting increased funding from the province, and we are working on some initiatives that will increase efficiency in the longer term. The challenges that we have listed here include limitations with international recruitment and enrollment and ongoing inflation, particularly on salary and benefit costs. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, thank you. I'll start by saying that we need to update this slide, but let me explain why we're showing this to you now. As we plan the budget each year, our CFO and her team construct budget models where they use best assumptions about changes in expenses related to salaries and benefit costs, utilities, insurance, and a host of other non-salary costs. And we compare that to changes in revenues that are projected from any government grant announcements and what we see happening with enrollment. What we're showing here is the model that we had in December. We know that the picture will look different following the announcement from the provincial government, but we wanted to share this with you for transparency, because what this does demonstrate is that we had been facing a shortfall of approximately $16 million for the year ahead. You'll see on the tuition line, which is the 4th line listed on this table, that we had actually been expecting to see less tuition revenue next year because of a decrease in international enrollment. So any new or incremental tuition revenue from a 2% domestic increase will be partially offset by that decline in international tuition. Again, this scenario doesn't reflect the latest information, such as any new grants, tuition changes, perhaps the impact of some efficiency initiatives, and changes to student financial aid. We're still waiting for the province to confirm what we'll receive, as well as the timing of those funds over 4 years. So once we have details from the ministry, we can update this. It's also important to note that this table relates specifically to the operating budget. As you may know, the operating budget includes the vast majority of our activity, the day-to-day activity of running the university and teaching the students. The full consolidated budget includes some other special purpose activity that is not shown here. For example, a research grant that must be used for a certain project in a given period of time, or donor funds that are earmarked specifically for a renovation. Those would not be part of the operating budget. The School of Medicine is an example of something that's outside of our operating budget because it's funded through separate money that was provided by three levels of government, the City of Brampton, the province, and recently the federal government with a capital contribution for those specific purposes. Next slide, please. Looking to the year ahead and beyond, we are optimistic that the new funding we receive will cover what we thought was going to be a budget shortfall for this year. So we are not planning for a base budget reduction in 2026-27. We do know that tuition increases will not keep pace with inflation. So it will be important to continue to pay close attention to efficiency wherever possible. We will increase the amount allocated to student financial assistance. And we know that the ministry is going to require us to do a lot more reporting to them on our operations as we go forward, and that will be tied to this funding. Next slide. I had mentioned attention to efficiencies. Last year, the university undertook an external review of our operations. It was conducted by a team from Deloitte. The cost of the review was covered by the ministry, and in fact, they had required us to do the review in order to receive some one-time funding last year. The assessment and implementation of the reviewer's recommendations is underway, and we're making some good progress. Next slide, please. When we're talking about budgets, it can sometimes feel a little grim. So when we look to the year ahead, it's also good to stop and take stock and highlight some of the initiatives that people from across the university have undertaken. We've had, for example, some very positive curriculum changes that have resulted in both efficiency and program enhancements at the same time. For example, we have new undergraduate and graduate programs in cyber science and cybersecurity, where students can learn a blend of technical skills along with the policy, regulatory, or financial aspects of cybersecurity. So they're truly interdisciplinary in nature. TMU has also made strides in international rankings. We've made advancements in the area of research, and we've been achieving some good cost savings in various areas, including a plan to consolidate leased office space as existing leases expire. Next slide, please. We'll end with a Mentimeter question for you, and after this, we'll open it up to questions that you may have for us. And the question is this: what suggestions do you have for the coming year, given the context that we've just outlined? So I'm seeing a mix of priorities or initiatives, as well as strategies or tactics to help our financial situation or find efficiencies. And also a nice note for the president there, who's consistently advocating for our university and for the sector as a whole. This does seem to be slowing down a little bit in terms of new items popping up. So I'll leave it for a few more seconds and then we can move on. Okay, why don't we move on to questions now? So that concludes the formal part of our presentation. We had said we would leave about half the time for people to have an opportunity to ask questions. And so we'll open it up to you now. Okay, that did not take long. Is TMU going to support students who are affected by higher tuition and changes to OSAP? Can I suggest that the president address this one?
Thank you very much, Kimberly, and thank you for the question. And this is an important one. I know that students are worried about the changes to OSAB, and they have answered the same question during the first town hall meeting. Yes, we need to do more for our students. We know that TMU is known to have a lot of students that are coming from low-income families, and we need really to open doors for those students. So, in addition, and this is part of the discussion that started within the executive team, is we do have every year a budget for financial aid to students. Yes, one of the objectives of this budget for this year are two things. I think Kimberly has mentioned that we are not planning more budget cuts. And I think the planning should be beyond 1 year. I saw one of the comments that here is do the planning for 4 years, because the announcement by the government is for 4 years. I totally agree with that. We should not, of course, spend money 1 year and then ask people to cut further cuts the following years. I think we should do a planning to make sure that we don't deal with those constraints down the road. So that's one aspect, is definitely paying attention to cuts and make sure that we don't continue this series of cuts that we had, unfortunately, in the past because of budget constraints. The second one is increase support to our students through financial aid. And also, we are actually launching a campaign, philanthropic campaign to talk to donors about the importance of investing in the future. Actually, the future of our students, but the future of our province and our country. And this is part of one of the top priorities for me for this year. Thank you for the question.
What will the government be considering when they decide how to allocate new funding to colleges and universities, right? Because I had mentioned that the 6.4 was going to be distributed and we don't have all the details yet. But Mohammed, you would have a sense of the general framework. Would you be able to share some of the factors?
Yeah, I mean, the big framework is that, of course, the government has announced, in my opinion, a significant funding, because we have been suffering for many, many years. It's significant in terms of global or total number, 6.4, which is a cumulative amount over 4 years for all universities, colleges, and indigenous institutes. So it's actually, when we include indigenous institutes, it's more than 50 institutions. And if you do the math, but you will probably try to find an average. No, the first factor in this distribution is overall enrollment. As you know, some institutions are larger than others. And of course, the mix of specific programs at each institution will also be important, because we know the government is going to increase per student funding more for types of programs than others, because they are more expensive to deliver. And that's something that is to be considered. But we are still waiting for details from the government regarding the allocation, and we will definitely do the budgeting once we have those details. We also understand that there will also be special targeted allocations for institutions in Northern Ontario, rural communities, and those offering French language programming. We are not part of those institutions, but I think it's important for the government to pay attention to those institutions that are really dealing with major financial situations. So kind of that the type of factors that will determine how much money each institution will get. We will know more when we get those details from the government. Thank you for the question.
Okay. Roberta, would you be able to comment on this one? What will the university be doing with new money that we'll get from the government?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. That seems to be top of mind for everyone. And, we are still waiting for details of TMU's allocations for 2026, 27, and beyond. Additional funding will be targeted for areas of greatest impact on our core mission of teaching, learning, and SRC. So, as the chair of the funding formula review group, I'm particularly grateful for this announcement and for the funding that we will receive. And as Kimberly showed you earlier, these funds are really expected to make an important difference for the year ahead. And looking beyond, as my colleagues have also said, we don't anticipate that the new funds will lead to longer-term coverage of inflation, for example. And so we'll need to continue with careful attention to finding efficiencies and being responsible. Thanks, Kimberly.
What kind of efficiencies do you see as possible over the next few years? I know there's a number of initiatives we've been working on. Either Mohammed or Roberta, are there any that you'd like to highlight that we have underway?
I think the exercise that was done this past year by Deloitte has at least giving us a sense of areas of efficiencies, because we were one of the first universities to accept to do this exercise, because we want to provide a proof to the government that we don't have a lot of funds, and this is why I think the government wanted the institutions to do this review of efficiency. And in the report that was produced by Deloitte, and we accepted those recommendations, we have a number of areas. Maybe Roberta can talk about a few examples, but that report, as you know, we made it also public, and anybody can go back to kind of the report. Roberta, over to you.
Sure, thank you. I'll just highlight a couple of areas that we've been working on. Of course, we've looked at lease repatriation, so we've been looking at space planning. We have been looking at duplication of services. For example, in the student services ecosystem, we do a lot of great work across the university. How can we do it better? Is a question that we've been asking ourselves. How do we support our students first and foremost? And how do we look at, for example, the manual processes that exist, for example, in the registrar's office. So we are looking at things like that. We're also looking at how to collaborate better across university with respect to interdisciplinarity. And those are just a few examples that came up with the efficiency and accountability review that Deloitte did, which many people have read. Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe
Roberta,
I'll
may I
take
tag
that.
you to this
I'm just
one?
looking at it. It's really
Yeah.
small. Okay.
Ask about
Um,
program
yeah,
closures.
I'll take this one. So I can say for this group that we are not planning to close programs this year. Unlike some institutions that have had a large number of very small programs, um, our programs at TMU have been medium or large in terms of overall enrollment, which has really helped them to remain sustainable. And I mean, I would really like to commend our decanal team at TMU for carefully looking at programs, courses with their colleagues to address what can be done creatively to sustain what we offer. So I guess the short answer would be no. Thank you.
With new money, how do we prevent bloat? Keep to new initiatives. I'm not sure if the question is suggesting we use the money for new initiatives. So maybe I'm not sure about that part of the question, but the first part of the question seems to discuss efficiencies again. So how do we maintain our eye on the efficiency piece, I think is maybe what this question is asking.
I will probably take it and then Roberta can add. Of course, we are very welcoming the new funding from the government. The question is this funding going to address all the shortcomings that we had in the past years? No. The answer is no. It's going to help, but no. And of course, we have to spend the money responsibly. I think it's important for us to continue with the efficiency measures that we are putting in place and put the money in areas of strategic importance of the university. We already have three important strategic plans: the academic plan, the strategic research plan, and the international plan. All those plans were developed in consultation with the community, and all the priorities of those plans are the priorities of the community. I think it's important to look at those priorities and see areas of improvement. I'm the one that I would recognize that the budget cuts year after year affected operation of the university and the quality of education. And I think we should always pay attention to the student experience. We are all here because of students, and if we don't give them the best possible experience, I think the role of the university will be questionable. And of course, investment in the experience of students in the classrooms, in the labs, but also outside. So both on the academic side, but also their experience on campus.
Okay, we have one here about asking about job cuts. And when I hear about reducing salaries and benefits, I don't know that there's been an announcement about reducing salaries and benefits, but in any case, we did mention the need to cover inflation. Any comments or clarifications you want to offer with respect to this question?
I don't think anybody has mentioned reducing salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits are per collective agreements, and we do have uh, many collective agreements. We have unions or union groups, and we respect collective agreements, and we negotiate in good faith with our colleagues from all union groups. And we cannot just go and reduce salaries and benefits. That's not the way that this university functions.
It's perhaps also important to note that I know in one of the Mentimeter question slides, I guess. There is no hiring freeze on faculty. So just so this group understands that we do not have a hiring freeze on faculty. We have been very responsible with respect to our efficiencies around position management, and actually our reviewers, well, in the EAF report, I should say, commented on TMU's ability to do that and find efficiencies where we can. But I agree with the president here. We work in a collective agreement environment, and we respect that.
This is a good question. Mohammed, do you want to tackle this one? I mean, we have a general framework and signal about roughly what the funding is, but without the
Absolutely.
details.
I think if you look at the table that was shared with you in terms of the initial plan for this year, the budget or the figure about before the announcement by the government was what was the number? 16 million?
16.2, correct?
16.2. So I am confident that with this $6.4 billion, we'll get more than that, but we don't know exactly the number. So yes, I'm confident, and I would, as I said at the previous town hall meeting, that would be a priority for us to not have budget cut this year.
Paying down our debt. I wonder whether this one would be addressed with the CFO.
And I know Joanne is here. I mean, we do have a plan to pay down our debt, so we're not actually accumulating debt. We are also, this is part of our fiscal responsibility to the board and to our community. I'm not sure if Joanne can comment further.
I think the way the webinar is set up, I don't know if it's possible for participants or attendees to comment, unfortunately.
I promoted Joanne to a panelist, so she should be
great.
with us shortly.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Joanne, are you here?
Yeah, she's here.
You got promoted.
Hello, can you see me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. We have a external debt policy that we take to our finance committee every year that updates the university's external debt, how we're paying for it, and our commitment to managing debt overall. So the university's debt strategy plan has been well laid out to make sure that the debt servicing is maintained. And also we entered into 2 bond issues that are long dated that make sure that our interest rates are set for many, many years. So it's an overall strong strategy for the university to ensure that there's not increased debt servicing costs. Some of our debt is amortizing, so we do actually pay it off annually. And several years ago, we actually were able to pay off one of our debts early because of the high interest costs that we were going to bear. So that actually saved the university operating budget significant amounts going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
International caps. This is a federal policy question, so I think it depends on their position in terms of immigration more broadly, right? It's hard to have a crystal ball on this one. Mohammed, do you have any signals?
I mean, we all know that the federal government has introduced new policies on international students, but on immigration in general. And international students are in the category of temporary immigrants. And that affected the whole sector in the country. I don't think, and I'm always public about it, I don't think that the federal government knew what they were doing. And they introduced this cap, and they have affected, unfortunately, many institutions in the country, specifically those who were relying on large number of international student enrollment. We kept our number always around 10% or so, but institutions that they had international student enrollment in the order of 30 to 40, 50, even some 70% are now suffering. And this is why you see all the budget cuts affecting those institutions, cut of programs, unfortunately, termination of thousands of positions is really because of that policy. Am I able to predict the future? I think it's very difficult to know what the federal government, what they will do. And I would just add that the international cap is one aspect, but also the visa processing is another complicated aspect that added to the misery of our system. Because international students, when they apply to different countries, to different universities in different countries. And of course, if they're waiting for Canada months and months, they will not exercise the option for Canada and they go elsewhere because we have competitors elsewhere at the international level from the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand, but also new markets. We are seeing now new markets in even China, Germany, the Middle East. So we have a lot of competition, and Canada's reputation, unfortunately, has suffered because of the changes to the federal policies.
Okay. Can you tell us whether there are plans to fix or improve or expand classroom spaces? So any classroom projects that we have planned for the coming year?
Maybe Roberta can comment on
Want me
this.
to start? Yeah, sure. So a couple of things we could say here. One of the things that I've committed to through the academic plan is in fact fixing some classrooms. For example, we're starting with the library space, library 072, which is a classroom space, because that's a big space. And the working group identified that as an important space too. And I think the working group was made up of faculty and staff. That would be really important. Aside from that, we will have, and this is longer term. So we do have a list of classrooms that my office has set aside money for fixing those. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I've been working closely with Kimberly and the deans to look at those classrooms and get that done. Aside from that, we've heard you, many of you, around the theaters, which do serve, as lecture halls. We are also expanding our classrooms in our new residence building on Bond, which will hold two big lecture spaces, which we're really excited about because that'll really help. But I noticed that my colleague Saeed is here, who's in charge of space planning, while the provost is in charge of academic space planning. So perhaps we could send it over to him, and then perhaps back
I
to
think
him.
Said had the same thing as Joanne. If we can give him access, but in the meantime, because the question, can you tell us more about the improvement, expansion of our and fixing? So we do have a part of the budget every year fixing and improving existing classrooms, but also every time we have a new capital project, we're also investing in the in additional classrooms. So the examples that I always give, during the pandemic, we opened the Daphne Cockwell complex, and of course it has additional classrooms that are used by the entire university, not just by the Faculty of Community Services. We have added a lot of classroom space in the building hosting our medical school in Brampton. So that's one thing that we added this year. Roberta mentioned the new residence project on Bond. We are adding 2 large classrooms. And also the building that is waiting for renovation, which is 277 Victoria. Part of the renovation plan is also to add additional classrooms to help us. So those are elements that I wanted to add. Is Said able to intervene?
Yes, I'm
Saeed
here.
is
Can
here.
you?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, great. So thank you very much. I think both Mohammed and Roberta provided valuable information in this regard. As Roberta pointed out, for classroom improvement and renovation, there is a committee under Center for Excellence for Learning and Teaching that reviews and provides recommendations every year with respect to class renovations. Every year we have an exercise for deferred maintenance, and the university spends roughly around 10 to 20 million dollars, depending on the year, on deferred maintenance. And as part of that program, there's funds available for classroom improvement and upgrades. We have been consistently using the funds through that exercise to make improvements. If we look at the last, I would say 5, 6 years since 2019-20 fiscal year, the macro, the budget committee of the university has approved more than $6 million for classroom upgrades. And so far, close to or around $4.6 million of that amount has been already spent. And there's a list of upgrades and improvements that goes through the process every year.
And just to add to Saeed's, and I know we're almost at time, when we say classroom spaces, we also mean labs. Through also outside funding that we apply for, that helps offset some of our costs, which, we have some labs that are, in need of some TLC, and we've committed to doing that as well. That is correct. That's right. Graduate students are not included in the international student cap.
yeah, they not, but they
Mhm.
also have to go the process for
That's right.
visa processing,
That's the
which
issue.
is unknown. As I said, we have 2 issues: the cap,
Right.
but also the time to process visa. And I can tell you, for some countries,
Oh.
it's almost impossible for them to get. We have had some grad students who have been accepted last year, and they're still waiting for their visas. So that's another important thing to share here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe that last question, I see that almost 7, Kimberly.
Right. So, Mohammed, I know the province will announce its budget by March 31st. So sometime between now and March 31st is the short answer. Do you have anything further, Mohammed?
I think 2 things is actually the provincial budget was announced today by the Minister of Finance to be March 26. But that's the overall budget. I think we will get our portion of the funding after March 26. So we definitely update our community about the budget as soon as it's shared with us by the government. And we are just hoping that we will get all the details before the end of April. As you know, we present the budget to the Board of Governors before the end of April for the fiscal year starting May 1st. So we're hoping that ultimate deadline for us is to have those details before we present the budget to the Board of Governors end of April.
Okay. And that brings us to just past 7. Luke, could we just go to the very last slide to wrap up? Thank you, thanks. I just want to highlight that we still do have one more town hall session, so a meeting much like this one, but in in-person format that's scheduled for this coming Thursday. In addition to that, we do have meetings planned also for various faculty, staff, and student groups, including our union colleagues, and we update the Board of Governors every month during the budget development process until the end of April. There's also a website where you can get some background and details that's noted there, and an email address where you can continue to ask questions or share suggestions with us, and that is monitored closely. And thank you very much for your interest and your participation this evening.
Thank you all for your participation, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone. It was great to have you here with us this evening.